Hello, everybody. Thank you for turning on this podcast when I'm high, and welcome to this new interview. As long as things have gone to plan, I think you've had four brand new interviews, and this one is a very special guest. He is a friend of mine. We have known each other. Our families have known each other for decades upon decades. Our moms actually met when they were teens. And so we've known each other for literally as long as I can remember. I'm going to go ahead here and introduce my friend Devin Champlin. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing pretty well. Thanks, man.
That's awesome. I like to get my guests' plugs out at the beginning. So you have a business, a shop called Champlin Guitars. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I own a storefront downtown Bellingham, Washington, where I live. It's a really small shop, and I do guitar repair here and sell used guitars and strings and stuff like that. The bulk of my business is doing repair work for people, setting up people's guitars, fixing them, and then for a long time, before I opened the shop, I had been mostly focused on just building custom guitars, acoustic guitars primarily. And to date, I've built almost 70 guitars custom for people, and I still have a wait list out for those. So like I build them when I can. Right now, I'm kind of like, I feel like I've kind of overextended myself business wise, like where I've kind of bitten off quite a hefty bite here, but it's pretty awesome. And of course, with COVID stuff, my shop is currently closed, so that sort of actually helps me in a way just to organize my time a little bit better. But yeah, so guitar repair and building and all things related with stringed instruments in general.
I have seen pictures of these guitars that you make, and they are absolutely beautiful. I am totally going to post some pictures, and I'm going to post a link to your shop, at least one or two links into the show notes. So if people want to check out your work, they can see it there. And what instruments, in addition to guitars, what instruments do you work on? And do you play?
Yeah, so I play, the easy answer is, kind of anything with strings really, but, and not like I'm not trying to brag, and I'm no virtuoso by any means, but I do like to mess around on instruments. So some I'm more comfortable than others, but I play the fiddle and the mandolin and the guitar are probably my main three. I mess around with the bass once in a while, and ukulele, and pretty much I get the chance to mess around with other cool stringed instruments here and there. People bring stuff into the shop, so I always love messing with them and tinkering with them, but pretty much anything that's in the string instrument family, I enjoy working on and setting up. Anything from mandolin to like a charango or a lute, or like the ones that people don't see every day. Yeah. I don't see them every day, but when they come in, it's really cool. There is a violin shop like just down the street here, and the owner of that shop, Dorothy, is awesome and a friend of mine. And so generally when people have like violin or cello type stuff, I just send them down the street to her. But other than that, pretty much, all the other kind of string stuff, let me have it.
That's very cool. Yeah. I've seen some videos of you performing. For some reason, this one sticks out in my memory of, I think it was you and somebody who were both playing like a banjo together at the same time or something like that. And I was just blown away at your instrumental skills and your singing skills. What was the name of that group, or that duo, I guess?
Yeah, that it was a duo, the Gallus brothers, Gallus, Gallus.
Okay.
We played pretty much from 2005 up until a few years ago. And it was just myself and Lucas Hicks, who he's was one of my best friends in the world, and he passed away.
Oh geez.
I don't know if we had ever really talked about that, but he had cancer for a long time, so it was something that he had dealt with, and so it took him at 39.
Wow.
But gosh, he was such an amazing, creative, just musical person. He I mean, even beyond the creativity and the music, he just had a spark. He was the type of guy who kind of, just kind of turned heads and would really just, he brought a lot of light into this world for sure. And playing music with him over the years and performing with him was something that I feel honored to have been able to do, and was really a joy. And yeah, like you mentioned, we came up with a bunch of tricks, so more theatrical sort of elements to our music, and including where we do some acro balance stuff, where I'd get Lucas up kind of like one leg on my shoulder, one leg on my other leg, and then we'd pass the ukulele back and forth, or he'd be juggling, and we did a lot of stuff like that, especially early on when we first started playing together, and we had a bunch of fun with that stuff. And there's a bunch of videos of it out there, because definitely when we did that stuff, people love to film it. Out came the phones. So if you go down the YouTube trail of the Gallus brothers, you'll find some entertainment for sure.
That's really awesome that you got to make amazing music with this guy, and there's video evidence of that. So I definitely urge everybody to go check all that stuff out. Yeah. Well, we are going to talk about music a bit more later, because that's sort of one of the big topics that comes up with cannabis. But before we get to that, can you tell me the first time that you remember that you tried cannabis, and if it wasn't this time, the first time that it actually worked and it got you high?
Yeah, and I remember it pretty well. So I don't know if you remember this or really knew this, but I in my high school years, I got really into the punk scene, punk music, and would go to the Fireside Bowl out in Chicago, and I got marginally into the straight edge scene, which is like kind of like a subsect of like the hardcore punk scene, and it's all people who basically don't are sober, and there's very varying degrees of it, like militant straight edge, whatever, or different people who with different attitudes about it. But for myself, I was really into the idea of like, I don't do drugs, I don't drink, I don't need any of that, and without ever having really tried anything or having had experience, but it worked for me, it made sense for me, and I connected with the scene along with it in that way. So coming from that place, when at some point, I guess I must have been 17 or 18. Like I said, I was into that scene. I was more just into the music and the social environment than like really caring super strong about, calling myself straight edge, or even really like having like subscribing to one philosophical belief or style. And so I think, my mind was, opening up as it should be as you're, 17, 18.
Right.
But, so I was out skateboarding, and lo and behold, I was by myself, and I skateboarded a lot at that time, and I found a bag of weed.
What?
Sitting on the ground. Yeah, I swear. And this is like 1997 or something. So this is like, in Chicago, and so I'm skateboarding around, and under like this park bench, or like next to it, is a bag of weed. And I saw it, and I knew what it was. I mean, like, I had friends who smoked weed. I recognized it. I was like, oh, weird. And I just like picked it up, put it in my pocket, and like kept skating, and kind of, and then like when I got home, I like put it on my shelf. It was just kind of like, I wonder what I'll do with this. And my thoughts were like, I'm going to sell this to somebody,
right,
or ask a friend, like, 'cause it's like, I don't do this. I don't know what, and then I just kind of forgot about it, and I had it for like a week or two, and I don't really know what sparked this. Like, it's just one of those times where I must have just been kind of home. I was listening to records, and I mean, I can't say it was boredom. I mean, it was just curiosity, I guess. But I just, it struck me that, I could try this, I guess, maybe, I guess it's right here. It kind of fell into my lap, I might as well see what it's all about, and my brother had moved out of the house at that point, and I had already rifled through his like random like drawer of stuff that he had left behind, and I found a pipe. I remember there was a pipe that I had seen before, so I grabbed this pipe and I loaded it up and made some smoke, and not much happened that first time. So I know you asked me about the first time I actually got high, but that was just an introduction to how it even came to me.
Which is an amazing story.
I know, right? It was just like, it just seemed so like meant to be cosmically in this way or something. At the time, like once I did end up really liking it. So then I tried it again, I feel like either the next night or the night after, because I enjoyed the act of smoking it. And I remember just kind of laying there being like, am I high? What is this about? Right. Like everybody, and then but yeah, the next time I did smoke it, like I for sure like got high and really classically, without even really knowing what I was doing or knowing how like cliche this was. Like I lit a candle and I had a bunch of my dad's records, and I was listening LP into vinyl records at the time, and I had his old copy of Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd's classic like album to get stoned to, and like without knowing any of that history, like that's like such a good stoner album.
Right.
And I put it on, and just kind of like went on like a miniature mild psychedelic journey, staring at the candlelight flickering on the ceiling and listening to that music. And then after that, I was pretty much like, yeah, this is awesome, I want to do this always and forever, and started skateboarding doing it, and like that was huge. But anyway, so that was my first experience.
I really love that. I think, there's so many funny things along the way, but I think it's especially cool and interesting to me that you were at home alone for the first time. I feel like that's such a rare occurrence. Usually the first time people try it, they're with, their friends who have maybe done it before, or, an older cousin or something like that, but that just fell in your lap, and you were alone and went and did like the perfect thing, watch a candle and listen to Dark Side of the Moon. I mean, what else? That's perfect.
I know, it's pretty ridiculous. I feel I've always felt really I don't know what the word is, but I feel glad that for whatever reason that my first experience with that was just completely on my own accord, without on my own timing, without being like somebody being like, here's some weed, you should smoke it, and me being like, I don't know, or at a party, or at like maybe some like slightly negative circumstances. It was really just sort of some innocent self-exploration, which it probably is pretty rare, and I'm really stoked that that's how it happened for me.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you remember any of the thoughts that were going through your head while you were listening to the music?
Not really. If anything, I do remember. I think maybe there was some amount of like non-thought, or like attempting to meditate, but just I remember more just the feeling and just kind of like enjoying the experience, so I don't remember having any real deep thoughts, it wasn't like I was like, oh, wait a second, like, having those kind of epiphanies that maybe I had later on with that and stuff. Yeah.
It was more about enjoying the music
and just the feeling. I remember feeling very much like my body feeling high, also like feeling like, like kind of pulsing with the music. And I remember just the light had such a glow to it that, I'd never really experienced. And just kind of overall just feeling it, and just kind of trying to, or not even trying, but just really just kind of going with that, going with the experience.
Yeah, and just being in it.
Yeah.
So when you think of cannabis in general, is there a particular story from your life other than that one that sort of jumps out at you? Is there a one that really sticks in your memory?
Well, not. I guess nothing came to mind. So no, but I mean, I have lots of stories along with it. I mean, I think of two things because I hardly use cannabis anymore, and it doesn't seem to do much for me, or if anything, like I never find myself quite in the right headspace where it's really feels enjoyable or productive for me to use. But because there are plenty of times where I'm like, oh man, I'd really just like to smoke a little weed right now. And I do think about a time from pretty early on, like probably this would have been like, maybe I'm just guessing here, but probably like the 10th time that I smoked weed after that Pink Floyd experience I described, and where I just was so giddy and so happy and silly and lightweight and just just it was really a wonderful experience that I had. And I was walking around late at night, just by myself, and just really enjoying everything. And I think back to that, and that's what I would love to experience with cannabis. And I've had a hard time finding that anymore. So that's but yeah. So if anything, often when I do think about like the desire to smoke some weed or eat it or whatever, it's like I'm like, well, if I could somehow find that sort of feeling, then gosh, I'd be all in.
Yeah. And people change as they get older, and their lives change, and so it's not always something that fits into their life anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes sense. So you mentioned smoking and eating it. Do you prefer one or the other? I assume you have more experience with smoking.
I've pretty much almost exclusively just smoked it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. More recently, I have done some edibles and vaped it, I guess, or I don't know. Done some of that stuff with folks, but yeah, 95% of the times I've used cannabis has been smoking it. Yep.
Yeah. And you said that you don't really do it that much anymore. If you had to guess these days, how often is it? Is it once a year, once every 2 years?
It's a few times a year. I actually I have, it's funny, I've had like randomly, as just in my life, people have given me weed that they've, either grown or that they've gotten from wherever, like as a musician. Like it's funny, like people will tip you with that. I think people often assume that I don't know if it's just because like I'm kind of a musician and more of a artist type, that they're like, oh well, you smoke weed, you'd like this,
Of course.
And I'm never offended, I'm like, well, yeah, I kind of do. I mean, I
Right.
do like it, but
Not
but
as much as you think.
Right. But yeah, so people have given me a lot of stuff. So I've actually like kept a little mason jar in my freezer of weed. So when I do want it, I mean, it's like a random mixed bag of stuff. And for me, I mean, it's like incredibly potent, although it's probably like years old now, but yeah. And so, but yeah, I'd say, a few times a year or something, I'll get the urge. And usually, yeah, it's almost always when I'm alone and, just kind of at home and just getting into something. And usually it ends up being music related. I'll play my guitar and space out. Yeah.
Nice. So you said so sometimes you get this urge. What is it? What's going on in your brain that you're like, now is a good time to do it? Is there something going on in your life? What's going on there?
I think it's the same thing that like, and it's the same type of urge that just when I feel like like almost like taking a shot of booze. Like I just kind of I want like a little quick alter, something just to. No, and for me, taking a shot of booze is not like a depressing thing, like sitting at the bar, like weeping. It's more like it's kind of almost celebratory, or it's like, ooh, things feel magic tonight. I'm just gonna throw in a curveball and see what happens, kind of thing.
There's something in the air.
Yeah, something in the air. Yeah, so it's pretty unpredictable, and just when I think I just want to feel in a spark for whatever reason. Yeah, hard to pin down exactly what that is.
Sure. Yeah, you just want to feel a little bit different that night.
Yeah. I mean, just talking about this right now makes me totally like, I'm probably going to go home and like break out the mason jar from the freezer and see what happens.
I was hoping that might be the case.
Totally.
And when you do that, can you record your experience and record what you think and then send that to me and I'll add it to the edit?
Oh, yeah.
I'm only half joking.
Yeah, awesome. I'll see what happens. I'll let you know.
Yeah. Dealing with technology in that state of mind can probably be a bit of a pain, though.
Right.
So often you are alone. But I assume that there have been times when you've been with other people when you're high. How do you think that they would describe you when you're high?
Well, so when I was smoking more often, so there was a time in my life, multiple years, where I would definitely, or there was at least a couple of years where I probably smoked weed every day or close to it. Mm-hmm. And then there was a few more years where it was still somewhat frequent, like every couple of weeks or something would come up. It was more in my life, in my social world. So during those times, I think people would probably just describe me as that's a good question. I don't know. It's kind of weird to think about how someone would describe me, but overall I would assume like just kind of like myself, but just a little goofier. I mean, I think in general, like when I did smoke with people in a social setting, we were having fun. Yeah, early on, like I said, I used to be super big into skateboarding, and so for me, smoking weed and skateboarding like went hand in hand. Once I combined the two, I was like, oh, this is awesome. This rules. And so it was always just having fun, I think. In a social setting, and when I was alone, it'd be more like a lot of art, a lot of music. But yeah, hopefully just giddy, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and
I'm sure sometimes I was just like probably like, stoned to like a ridiculous level, but for the most part, like I think I was, kind of keeping it together and staying pretty productive still.
Yeah. One hopes. And you are already, I think, sort of a fun, giddy, happy person, from the, we haven't had a lot of experience together for a long time, but from what I remember, and even just talking to you now, that's what you give across. So yeah, it just seems like that would just be exaggerated even more so.
Sure. Yeah.
And so when you do smoke, what is it that you start to feel, in a very general sense? What does it feel like to be high, do you think? And obviously this is very subjective.
Yeah. Well, so these days, and this is kind of why I think I started smoking less and less, is like I tend to get more introspective, more internal. And so so these days, like smoking socially is pretty rare for me. And I have done it a few times, and it's like a few times in the recent years, and I've had great experiences. But often, I feel like when I do smoke weed, I feel, I just like, I get super in my head, which, I'm sure is very common for a lot of people, but I get kind of introspective. I think about my life. I think about decisions. I get a fresh perspective, which I love having a fresh perspective on everything and like minute details that I'm not really even thinking about. So I appreciate that. Sometimes it feels like more work these days when I smoke. Like it's more of like almost like a internal therapy session with myself. Yeah, and it's so funny because I know these days also, like, I mean, Washington State where I live, like, it's been legal for some years, and all the stores have, like, so many different varieties, and it's really like it's scientific the way people describe, like, well, this has this percentage of this, and this is much more of a body high, and this one's much more philosophical. And I have not retained any of that knowledge of what does which stuff, like, indica, whatever. I'm just like, I don't actually know, give me the one that's kind of weak and is going to make my body feel good. Like, that's usually what I want, because I think when I am feeling like, lately, when I do feel like, kicking in that little extra spark or throwing in that curveball because there's magic in the air, it's usually not that I really, I think what keeps me from doing it is, like, I don't really want, like, an intense night of introspection. I kind of just want to feel good. And and I've had a hard time finding that balance, and I know, like, there's all the varieties and all that stuff, but the other huge factor is me and just my own personal spot and my personal growth and what I'm going through. And anyhow, but yeah, that's generally what I feel when I do smoke weed, is like I go down a internal sort of mental pathway.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily negative, but it's not necessarily, like, fun,
Sure. It's not always the thing that you want to be doing at that moment, but you are aware that it might happen.
Yeah.
And, that could sometimes be a reason to have some, like, hey, I'm struggling with something. I'm going through something that I really want to dig into. I'm sure that's not very common, but that definitely could be a reason for you or other people to have a little bit and, see where that takes you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And I'm sure there's probably more people out there that I don't know about who use it more in a medicinal way for, like, psychological reasons or whatever. Yeah.
Therapeutic. Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people do. And because this is not something that you do very regularly, and you are looking more for, like, it sounds like your body to feel good. I'm not sure, if you'll have very specific answers for some of these questions, but we'll just go ahead and ask them anyway. How does your level of focus change, on, like, a certain task, or in a general sense, or have you even ever thought about that?
I mean, yeah, I don't know if I think about it much, but I mean, just thinking back on my experience, I would say that without a doubt, my level of focus is intense. For me, like, I mean, if I do set to drawing something, my focus is at the tip of that pen. It's like my entire existence kind of, like, gets very concentrated into the task I'm doing. So yeah, there is a focus for sure.
It sounds like, thinking back to that first time when with the music and the flame, you were probably pretty focused in on that flame of the candle.
Right, yeah. Or yeah, watching the light, the light from it, kind of the reflection of it against the ceiling, I remember, yeah. Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, and I love stories like that because, that's not something that most of us in our day-to-day life are going to focus on. The flame, the reflections of the flame, the light bouncing around the room, that those tend to be things that people focus more on when they are high. And then when you do look at those things, you realize, you see the beauty in it, or you notice something new about it that you had never noticed before. And so, yeah, I just love hearing stories like that because, you sort of just learn something new about that one little thing, which I just think is beautiful.
Right.
So what is your sense of time like when you get high?
That's a good question. I honestly, I feel like my sense of time when I'm not high is kind of skewed.
How so?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, I feel like I'm not the best at managing my time. I mean, considering, I mean, I do run a pretty busy business, and so I guess I'm managing it okay. But I'll work for hours, and I'll like look up at the clock. I'll be like, oh geez, it's 8 p.m. In my head it's like feels like 4 or something. So I kind of get that sort of like lost into a project anyway, where I really lose track of time. So that's probably just amplified a little. I guess I haven't really thought about it too much, but I'm certainly not thinking much about time when I'm high.
Yeah, you're probably so focused on whatever's going on that you lose time in general, which I think is pretty common.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm guessing the answer is no, but do you ever work on projects, your guitars specifically, when you get high, or is that more of a when work is over kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely when work is over. Yeah, that's a no. Yeah, although I love the idea of it too for the more creative stuff. What I do though, I mean, there's so many tools involved, so many. I don't know. The feeling of being high and diving into a creative project is pretty awesome. But when somebody's paying me to do it, and there's a certain amount of precision that has to happen, for me personally anyway, it seems like kind of not the best idea, and like I said, with sharp chisels and stuff, and not to say that other people can't do it or shouldn't, but yeah, for me it's pretty separate.
Yeah, definitely not for everybody. But you segued perfectly into my next question, which is about creativity. How does it affect your creativity?
Yeah, well, how does it affect my creativity? I guess when I first was getting high, around 17, 18, and I was already drawing a lot. I always kept a sketchbook, thanks to my mom, because she would always give me sketchbooks for Christmas and stuff, and so had that nice influence, as you know about. But yeah, so I always was drawing and doodling anyway. And when I started getting high and started really getting high on the regular, I feel like my drawing style really changed, and just I think for the better. I mean, it's kind of like, again, there's a lot of like cliche jokes in here, but just like it's like playing music. Like you might think you're playing the most awesome thing when you're stoned, and then if you record it and listen back, you're like, oh geez, it's actually really like kind of lame. It just felt awesome,
right.
Or I don't, I mean, so but I do feel like my drawings definitely took on some new dimensions, and I can't attribute it all to the fact that I was getting high. I mean, part of it is just I was doing it more, I was growing. I mean, I was out of high school and just growing so much just as a young adult in the world. But yeah, but it certainly was a factor. And there was other stuff too. I mean, I was getting high smoking like the cheap weed that I could score in Chicago in the 90s, but also I was starting to eat mushrooms and acid and other things like that too, which I'm sure all had an effect.
Sure.
But yeah, how it affects my creativity, I guess, is generally these days and for the longer term, has just, I feel like when I'm high, I tend to focus on my creative project and can delve into it.
And do you feel like you're more creative, or does it allow you to do something differently that you felt like you couldn't do before?
I don't know. Yeah, I guess I wouldn't say that, but I mean, I don't know if it makes me feel more creative. I mean, as far as allowing me to do something that I wouldn't have done before, for sure, there is maybe some sort of a loss of some type of inhibition that happens. I mean, kind of like with alcohol, like you have a couple drinks and you're like, actually, I can get up and sing this karaoke song, so like maybe, or whatever. I mean, that's a bad example, but
I think that's actually a perfect example.
Sure, right. So, like you smoke some weed, you're like, yeah, you know what? I am just going to mix these weird colors with paints. I don't care if it's like, like, right. So then maybe there's like something that you might just try something, or I might try something that I wouldn't have necessarily tried before. But I don't know if I could say that necessarily translates to being more creative, because I feel like, I feel like my creative output is, has remained pretty strong through sobriety or whatever stonedness.
Right. So sort of another stereotypical thing that gets brought up with cannabis especially is your memory. Have you noticed changes in your memory when you're high or since you started using it when you were, a teenager?
Yeah, I definitely I can't remember right now. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I definitely noticed some short-term memory loss. I feel like there was times when I was smoking a lot of weed that are just like kind of gone from my memory and I'm fine with that. Like not like blackout style, but just like where it's like, oh yeah, I remember I was there, but like there's like so many details that are just gone.
Sure.
And I can't necessarily 100% attribute all that stuff to weed. I mean, part of that's just the passing of time too. But yeah, I would say for sure there's some stuff that are just like, I think what you would typically expect from some memory loss. I don't know if you were going to ask about this later on or not, but also, I mean, to me, this is related to the memory question, is just the idea of sleep and dreams. But I did always notice that when I was smoking a lot of weed, and if I'd go for periods without smoking weed for whatever reason, I would remember my dreams more often. And I didn't even realize that I wasn't remembering my dreams before that, but all of a sudden it would kind of come in this flutter of like, oh wow, yeah, I kind of forgot I had not been like really waking up and thinking about my dreams, because I just I'd wake up and I'd be like, yeah, I guess I dreamt last night, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's very common or not, but that was definitely my experience.
Yeah, that actually was a question I was going to ask, and I think it was just a couple interviews ago that subject came up, and I was like, oh, I should actually add this to my questions, because it was not something that I had been asking people, and so I made a point actually to put it on the list for today. And so you said that when you weren't high, you wouldn't necessarily remember your dreams, but when you were high, you would tend to remember them more so.
Oh no, vice versa actually. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it's something I didn't even really realize when I was getting high on the regular, like let's say for 3 months I had basically smoked weed every day. That's when I was not remembering my dreams. Okay. But I didn't even really realize it until I took that week or two off of smoking weed, and all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I'm remembering so many dreams all of a sudden, so yeah.
Yeah, it definitely has an effect on your sleep. I'm sure this is something that scientists are trying to study. I'm trying to remember what other people have said. I think somebody has said that they have more vivid dreams, or it affects the type or the way that their dreams are. I don't remember if they said that it affects their memory of their dreams necessarily. But for you, it sounds like you have no memory of what your dreams were, so who knows how it affected your dreams at all.
Right. Yeah.
They could have been the most crazy things. And I wonder if that has anything to do with how deep of a sleep you were having. Was it deeper? Was it less deep? And I don't know enough about the science of sleep to guess, but I'm sure there's something going on there.
Right. Yeah. And as far as like deeper sleep or not, I couldn't really say. I don't. Yeah. I feel like I've been blessed with pretty decent sleep all my life, so I don't remember it being particularly different than other than the dreaming part.
Yeah. So that is the end of part 1 for Devin's interview. Thank you to Devin for the great interview. It was great catching up with you. Thank you to all of you listeners for checking this podcast out. Rate and review and subscribe and share, and send me a message. All the contact info should be in the episode description. There's email. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can send me messages. Just that's all I got to say. Thank you for listening, and next week is part 2. Goodbye.